Hi, I'm Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy Segment Show. Also today in this segment, I'm at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, and continuing episode 4 with part 2. What you see right behind me is Southern Pacific 459-579. Southern Pacific 459-579 was built by Pacific Car and Foundry in Renton, Washington in 1971 and is a refrigerator car. This car was once used for hauling food on board, which were perishables, to markets outside Arizona. Oranges, grapefruit, lettuce, potatoes, and melons were loaded at the docks in Mesa, Hiley, Tempe, and Phoenix for shipments to markets outside Arizona. Also, the car had onboard diesel-powered refrigeration system which could maintain the temperature inside the car just above the freezing level. Then later on, the car was retired, and in 1995 it was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, when it was at the original location till moved to this area. Then in 2014 it was getting repainted till about 2017 it was completed. Today this car can be seen at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is preserved today. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 1505. Denver and Rio Grande 1505 was built by the International Car Company in Kenton, Ohio in 1966 and is a steel caboose. Denver and Rio Grande 1505 was used for the standard gauge Denver and Rio Grande Railroad on the back of freight trains many years ago, and also was used as the train crew's office as well. Then later on, this caboose was retired and was likely later used by Royal Gorge Industries, and then came to be part of the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen on display today. What you see right behind me is Southern Pacific 413. Southern Pacific 413 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1947 and is a bay window caboose. Originally, this caboose was used by the Southern Pacific subsidiary Texas and New Orleans Railroad and originally numbered as Texas and New Orleans 512 and used behind freight trains and used as the train crew's office. Then it was used by the Southern Pacific Railroad and renumbered as Southern Pacific 413 and used on that railroad on the back of freight trains as the train crew's office. Then, in 1982, it was retired and then came to be part of the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, when it was located in Tumbleweed Park till it and the museum was relocated to this area where it is seen today. What you see right behind me is United States Army C-45. United States Army C-45 was built by American Hoist Company and Derrick Company in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1943 and is a 25-ton crane. This crane was used by the United States Army many years ago and used for lifting and lowering things, as it would be used for maintenance voice service on the United States Army Railroad as well, and also it was stationed at the Navajo Army Depot just near Belmont, Arizona. It was sold to Valley Steel and Supply Company in Tempe, Arizona, where it was served till 1995. Then it was soon retired and was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona by Valley Steel and Supply Company, where it is preserved today. What you see right behind me is Southern Pacific 7173. Southern Pacific 7131 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1949 and is an idler flat car. Originally was built as just a flat car with a wood deck and one of several such cars constructed for the Southern Pacific Railroad, and its original number it had is unknown. Also, it was used to carry cargo that flat cars hauled many years ago. Sometime prior to 1969, it was converted to being an idler flat car and used as a tool car and assigned reporting mark as Southern Pacific MW 7028A. In 1969, it was renumbered 7131 and also paired with Southern Pacific Crane 7130. Also, it remained in service based in Tucson until decommissioned in 1989. Then, later it was moved to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, when it was located in Tumbleweed Park till it and the museum relocated to this area in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today. What you see right behind me is Southern Pacific 7130. Southern Pacific 7130 was built by Bay City Industrial in Bay City, Michigan in 1910 and is a 120-ton crane. For many years, this crane was used by the Southern Pacific Railroad and was placed in service in Tucson, Arizona, and originally was numbered as Southern Pacific 620. In 1934, it was renumbered as Southern Pacific 7034. Then, in 1940, renumbered as Southern Pacific 7028. Then, in 1969, renumbered as Southern Pacific 7130, and also it remained in service based in Tucson until decommissioned in 1989. Then later it was moved to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, when it was located in Tumbleweed Park till it and the museum relocated to this area in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today. What you see right behind me is W.R. Gray 779. W.R. Gray 779 was built in 1938 and is a three-dome tanker car. This car was used for the W.R. Grace Company and was used to carry chemicals or solvents, which is what the three separate compartments were used to carry, and W.R. Grace Company had offices in Chandler, Arizona. Also, this car was used on freight trains on like a line of tanker cars and for many years. Then, later, the car was retired, and in 1986, the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona bought it from Valley Steel and Supply, and the car was then moved to the museum, where it can be seen preserved today. What you see right behind me is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 33219. Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 33219 was built by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad in Cleburne, Texas in 1967 and is a pulp flat car. Originally, the car was built as a GA 80 mill gondola car. It was later rebuilt as a pulp flat car and was used in the forestry service on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad in northern Arizona to haul pulpwood logs to the mill. Then later on the car was retired and then came to be part of the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona at its original location till being moved to this site with the museum where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Arizona Railway Museum 7013.
Arizona Railway Museum 7013. It was built by General Steel Industries in Granite City, Illinois in 1966 and is a flat car. It was possibly once used by the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad many years ago, and it was once used to carry cargo that a flat car like this one once hauled many years ago. Also, it is called a Commonwealth-type car, and the paint was formerly owned by Commonwealth Steel and was rather ubiquitous during that period. It was used in general freight service. The Southern Pacific subsequently obtained it, and it became part of the Southern Pacific 70,000 series flat cars. Later on, the car was retired, and in 2009, it was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, and numbered as Arizona Railway Museum 7013. And in 2013 and 2014, it had been cosmetically restored as well, and today it is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum where it is today.
What you see right behind me is San Manuel 184.
San Manuel 184 was built by Mager Car Company in Clifton, New Jersey in 1955 and is an ore riding hopper car. This car is one of 3 rider cars built for the San Manuel, Arizona Railroad, and it ran on the lead or rear of the train between the San Manuel smelter facility and the mine. The car was in the lead on the empty shove to the mine and trailed, bringing loads to the smelter. The car was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona by Capstone Mining through the generosity of Ron Llewellyn. Marco Crane was contracted to lift the car from the dirt onto active rails. After a little mechanical work, the car moved on its own wheels from San Manuel to Hayden Junction on September 12, 2017, with no issues. While it was on the Copper Basin, it was given a thorough inspection by the Union Pacific mechanical foreman Aaron Sassaman in preparation for the move to the museum, and Copper Basin moved the car to Magma Junction on September 20, and then Union Pacific moved the car from Magma Junction to McQueen Junction on September 22. Then Union Pacific moved it from McQueen Junction, and then the car arrived at the museum. Today, it is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Copper Basin 341,002.
Copper Basin 341,002 was built by Baldwin Lima Hamilton in 1961 and is an ore gondola car. Originally, this car was used by the Southern Pacific Railroad as Southern Pacific 341,002 and was built specifically to haul concentrated ore from the American Smelting and Refining Company, Ray Mine, to the copper refining plant in El Paso, Texas. The car is equipped with 2 large bottom dumping doors for quick unloading at the smelter. In 1993, the car was purchased by the Copper Basin and continued to haul concentrate for the Copper Basin, and it also retained its original number. Then, later on, the car was retired, and in 2015, it was then donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today.
What you see right behind me is Southern Pacific 359-246.
Southern Pacific 359-246 was built by General American Transportation Company and is a sugar beet gondola car. This car was used to carry beets whenever it was used by the Southern Pacific Railroad, and the wooden sides provided a better surface than metal for the beets. Upper extensions were added around 1959 to increase capacity. It was typical of those that brought sugar beets to the Spreckels sugar processing plant at the northwestern corner of McQueen Riggs Road in Chandler, Arizona. The plant opened in 1967 and processed the beets into sugar plus a small amount of granular sugar for the local market. The plant closed in 1984 when soft drink manufacturers switched to using less expensive, high fructose corn syrup. The car was acquired by Spreckels' parent company, Imperial Sugar, after the beet trains ended in the 1990s, and Spreckels' parent company, Imperial Sugar, donated it to the Western Pacific Railroad Museum in Portola, California. Then, when the Western Pacific Railroad Museum decided to reduce their collection and offered the car to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, and it was donated to the museum, and in 2019, it was moved to the museum and seen on display where it is today.
You can see right here, here's a Trackmobile here at the museum. They use this to move their equipment around whenever they decide to, here at the Arizona Railway Museum. And that 9,000 sign, I believe, means it can pull 9,000 tons of train cars, it looks like. This was made by Marmon, as you could see, and yeah. And this one, I think this one's numbered 652, and I have no clue where this one came off of. Let me go to this side and find out. And it doesn't say, but yeah. Here it is on here today. What you see right behind me is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 56.
Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 56 was built by Pullman in 1923 and is a business car. Originally, it was numbered as Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 34, and for many years it had been used on the back passenger trains when used on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, and in 1928 it was assigned to the Vice President of Operations. In 1947, the air conditioning was added. In 1953, it was rebuilt by the Topeka shops in Topeka, Kansas, and the interior was modified. In 1956, roller bearings were installed. In 1966, it was assigned to the Assistant General Manager of the Eastern Lines of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. In 1973, upgraded in Fort Worth, Texas, and renumbered as Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 56, and the car was modified to be completely self-contained and not require a steam generator or power car. Then later the car was retired, and after retirement the car has seen a number of private ownerships as well as Conrail and was numbered PPCX 800,156 and was used in charter service and even hauled on the back of Amtrak passenger trains. Then, in 2016, the car was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona by Tom and Susan Hoback, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend 15.
Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend 15 was built by the Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend Railroad in 1944 and is a wooden caboose. It served the Phelps Dodge copper mine in Ajo, Arizona. It was originally painted the present color when used by the Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend Railroad and used for freight service on the railroad. It was also used for numerous years to provide passenger service between Gila Bend and Ajo, and the slide doors allow for freight loading on one end. Also, it was then repainted red with the cupola painted yellow and likely renumbered as Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend 1. Then later on it was retired, and in 2006 it was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona by the Phelps Dodge Copper, and then in 2012 it was being repainted and was likely finished in 2013, and today the car can be seen preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today.
What you see right behind me is Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend 304.
Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend 304 was built likely around the 1900s and is a flat car. This car was once used on the Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend Railroad, hauling logs for many years. Then, in 2005, it was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today, and in 2013 it received a new floor and a new coat of paint, and the car looked good as new. Today it is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is today. Also, the shipping container on it was used by the Southern Pacific for hauling less than carload customer shipments as well.
What you see right behind me is the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Vista Canyon.
The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Vista Canyon was built by Pullman Standard in 1947 and is a lounge observation car. For many years, this car was used on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Super Chief passenger train and is one of 4 built for the Super Chief. The car had 1 double bedroom, 4 drawing rooms, and a round-end observation lounge. In 1956, the round end was modified to allow use of the car in mid-train service. Later on, the car was soon retired, and in 1994, it was added with a small buffet kitchen when the car went to private owners, and it was numbered as PPCX 800,504 and also used in charter service as well. In 2001, it was then donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona by Fred and Dale Springer and preserved at the museum where it can be seen on display today.
What you see right behind me is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 3079.
Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 3079 was built by the Budd Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1937 and is a passenger coach. Also, the car is named Diablo Canyon. This car was used for many years on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, and people would also ride on board it whenever it was used on passenger trains for the railroad many years ago. In 1969, it was sold to the New Jersey Department of Transportation. Later, it was donated to the United Railways Historical Societies of New Jersey by New Jersey Department of Transportation. In 1991, it was bought by John McMath, and he configured the car for personal use and renamed it Cocoa Grove and stripped out the coach interior and installed 4 bedrooms, kitchen, small dining area, and a solarium lounge at the vestibule end. In 1996, the car met the requirements for Amtrak service and has continued to be mechanically certified. The car is the oldest Amtrak certified and operable Budd built car in America. In 2005, John donated the car to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, and Union Pacific delivered the car to the museum, and also the car is even numbered with PPCX 900,378 as well. Today, the car is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today.
What you see right behind me is Arizona Railway Museum 1.
Arizona Railway Museum 1 was built by Plymouth Locomotive Works in Plymouth, Ohio in 1943 and is the 4463rd diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an ML8 switcher type diesel locomotive. Also, the locomotive is named George E. Holt. Originally, the locomotive was used for the United States Army Railroad and originally numbered as United States Army 7595 and was likely used for shunting cars at an Army base many years ago when it was used by the United States Army Railroad, and it was stationed at the Army Air Corps Victorville Advanced Flying School in Victorville, California. In 1966, it was then sold to private company M. Lummis and Company of Richmond, California. Later, it was owned by Pacific Railroad Contractors of Torrance, California, and then Railroad Builders of Myra, Loma, California. Then later, the locomotive was retired, and in 1988, the locomotive was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona by the railroad builders, and the locomotive was restored to operation, and it was repainted blue and renumbered as Arizona Railway Museum 1. And in 2005, in honor of the locomotive's long-term caretaker. It was named after George E. Holt, and the locomotive even operated on the museum grounds. In 2011, the air compressor failed, which caused extensive collateral damage to the engine, front gear, casing, and radiator. Then it was going under restoration till 2019 when it was finally complete and it was once again operating. And today, it is sometimes used to move equipment around on the museum grounds as well.
What you see right behind me is Kennecott Copper Company 801.
Kennecott Copper 801 was built by General Electric in Schenectady, New York in 1957 and is the 33104th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is a 25-ton type diesel locomotive. This locomotive was used by Kennecott Copper but lettered as Western Knapp Engineering and numbered 1 and working in Hayden, Arizona while Western Knapp was building the Hayden smelter in 1957 and lettered for Kennecott in 1958. This locomotive was used at the Hayden smelter for slag disposal service when slag disposal was no longer required after the smelter process was changed in the mid-1970s, and the locomotive was rebuilt and painted in bicentennial red, white, and blue, and used for general in-plant switching. It moved to adjacent Azarco Smelter, which stands for American Smelting and Refining Company, after Kennecott sold Ray Mines Division to American Smelting and Refining Company in 1986. The Jake Jacobson acquired the locomotive in 2017. Copper Basin folks rebuilt and repainted the locomotive to pristine condition to donation to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona. The chain drive was removed for transport by rail to the museum and it was moved from Hayden to Magma Junction in September that year. The Union Pacific Railroad then moved it from Magma Junction to McQueen Junction and then moved the locomotive from McQueen Junction to the museum and the drive chain was reinstalled. Today, this locomotive is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is preserved today, and also it is sometimes fired up and operates on the museum grounds and even used to move equipment around as well.
Okay, you can see here's a Wig Wag displayed here at the museum, and it's been here for a long time. I think came to the collection and I don't know, probably once it got here, I'm sure. But as it's here, you could even operate it. So push the button on this side of it and we'll go to work. And I'll have you listen to her sing. And that's how it's done. What you see right behind me is in Topeka and Santa Fe, Denehotso.
The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Denehotso was built by Pullman Standard in 1938 and is a lounge observation car. The car was originally named Pullman Denehotso and originally built as a round-end observation car. In 1948, the car was sold to the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, and for many years this car was used on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Super Chief passenger train and is one of 6 built for the Super Chief. The car had 1 double bedroom, 4 drawing rooms, and a round-end observation lounge. In 1954, the car was rebuilt, changing the round end to a blunt end and adding 1 seat to the lounge. While on the railroad, the car also carried the number 1853. This was for inventory purposes only. In 1968, the car was retired and was donated to Steamtown Foundation in Bellow Falls, Vermont. Steamtown later moved to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and some pieces of equipment were sold at auction. This car was sold to Bill Feuring, who sold the car to museum member Mike Salwitz. In 1995, the Arizona Railway Museum purchased the car from Mike, and today it is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen on display today. Today, it is the only remaining observation car from the original train set and can be found at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 2870.
Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 2870 was built by Pullman Standard in 1947 and is a chair car. This car was used on passenger trains for many years and was used on Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe's El Capitan passenger train, and passengers would even ride on board it whenever it was used on the El Capitan passenger train as well. In 1971, it was then sold to Amtrak and renumbered 4484 and had been used on passenger trains whenever it was used by Amtrak as well. Then, in 1976, the car was retired and it was sold to Pullman Pizzeria in La Cruces, New Mexico. Then, in 1981, it was sold to Jim Bennett of La Cruces, New Mexico. Then, in 1990, Jim then sold the car to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 504.
Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 504 was built by Pullman Standard in the 1950s and is a dome car. Also, the car is named Plaza Teos. This car was used on passenger trains for many years on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad and was used on the Super Chief passenger train, and also passengers would ride on board it and even ride in the dome and have a good view of the scenery. Also, the upper dome featured swivel chairs, while below was a lounge, cocktail room, and the turquoise room for private dining. Later, the car was then used by Amtrak and renumbered as Amtrak 9354 and likely used on the Coast Starlight. Then the car was eventually sold to Dr. Cushman, who operated the car as part of the Broadway dinner train in Nashville, Tennessee. Then it was retired, and after service on the dinner train, the car was stored at the Tennessee Central Railway Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. In 2008, It was then donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, and was restored on the inside. Today, it can be seen at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Southern 16.
Southern 16 was built by Pullman in 1879 and is a business car. Originally, this car was used by the South Carolina Railroad in Charleston, South Carolina, and was originally an office car. It was used by the South Carolina and Georgia Railroad, which absorbed the Southern Railroad in 1899 and originally numbered as South Carolina and Georgia 101. In 1899, it was then used by the Southern Railway and renumbered as Southern 115, and for the next several years was used by the Southern Railway on passenger trains, and it was assigned to Joseph H. Sands, who was Assistant General Superintendent of the Eastern District. Then, about 1903, it was then renumbered as Southern Railway 111, and it was assigned to S.J. Collins, who had Joseph's title, then to Horace Baker, who then had Joseph and S.J.'s title in 1904. In 1905 to E.H. Copeman, who was General Superintendent. Then in 1907 to H.E. Hutchins, who was the General Superintendent of the Northern District. Then in 1912 was renumbered as Southern Railway 11. Then in 1914 it was then assigned to R.E. Simpson, who was General Manager of lines east on the Northern District. In 1920 renumbered as Southern Railway 9. In 1921 it was assigned to R.B. Pegram, who was the Vice President of Tax, Fuel, and Publicity Department, and that year it was renumbered as Southern Railway 6. In 1928, assigned to J.B. Akers, who was an assistant to a Vice President of Maintenance of Way. In 1931, it was assigned to Bernard Herrmann, who was a chief engineer with J.B. Akers when he was an assistant chief. In 1934, it was held reserved. In 1935, it was assigned to L.C. Schultz, who was a superintendent of motive power. In 1946, it was renumbered as Southern Railway 16, and it could be possible it stayed with L.C. Schultz in Knoxville, Tennessee, because he remained in that position until he retired in 1960. Then it was soon retired, and in 1967, Houston Sports Association in Houston, Texas had it. In 1970, it was sold to Phoenix Cotton Pickery in Phoenix, Arizona. In 1982, it was sold to Russell Joslin and named Desert Valley by him. Then, in 1995, Russell donated the car to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today.
What you see right behind me is Southern Pacific 2741.
Southern Pacific 7241 was built by St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1937 and is a horse car. Also, the paint you see on this car is the original paint scheme, and the car was used for having horses on board and used for passenger trains on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, and it transported racehorses between racetracks and other points around the country during the decades when passenger trains were the principal means of transportation. It has a very wide end door at one end for loading horses from special platforms to which it could be backed up, with a smaller door within it for car-to-car passage, the 3 wide sliding doors per side, the equipment needed to feed and care for the horses, and accompanying attendants and handlers, and space for Railway Express agency use. In 1951, the car was converted to a postal storage car for use on the Golden State, and it was renumbered as Southern Pacific 4300, and the car was repainted with the paint scheme to red over silver of the Golden State. In 1953, it was then repainted to an aluminum color with a red letterboard on and the Golden State insignia on the side. In 1958, it was repainted again, but this time to silver with orange letterboard of the Sunset Route. In the early 1960s, it saw the color changed to the solid gray used on all of the head-end passenger equipment. In 1966, the car was retired from revenue service and converted to a heavy tool car at the Sacramento shops in Sacramento, California, and used for maintenance of way, and renumbered as Southern Pacific 59, Southern Pacific 5984, and the roller bearing wheel sets were removed for use on the heavyweight business cars. In the early 1970s, the car was moved to Phoenix, Arizona for use by the car repair forces. It was stationed for a time at the Tempe Depot in Tempe, Arizona before moving to Phoenix Yard. Then, in 1994, the car was sold for dismantled to Smith and Charles Salvage. In 1995, Jim Smith donated the car to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, and in 1996, the car was moved to the museum by the Southern Pacific Railroad, and also it had been repainted and cosmetic restoration was completed, and today it is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 580.
Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 580 was built by Pullman in 1910 and is a passenger coach. Originally, it was built as a wood car on steel frame. For many years, this car was used on passenger trains on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. Around 1917, it was rebuilt as a men's smoking car. In 1938, it was rebuilt as a crew kitchen diner for use on a wreck train out of Barstow, California, and numbered as Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 198-993. Later on, the car was retired and was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, and it was delivered to the museum by the Union Pacific in 1997, and today it is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum, where it is today, and the car had been going under cosmetic restoration on the inside and the outside starting in 2006, and then in 2011, the paint job was completed. Today, the car is preserved at the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 405.
Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 405 was built by Pullman in 1926 and is a business car. This car was built as one of 18 superintendent cars, and it was even used on the back of passenger trains when used on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad and used across the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe system. Then later it was retired and removed from service in 1966 and ended its service in La Junta, Colorado, and was sold to San Angelo Tank Car in San Angelo, Texas in 1968. Then it was stored at the Temple Railroad Heritage Museum in Temple, Texas. Then, in 2008, it was donated to the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today. And also, it was repainted before 2011 to its Pullman green color as well.
What you see right behind me is Southern Pacific 4740.
Southern Pacific 4740 was built by Pacific Car and Foundry in Renton, Washington in 1980 and is a bay window caboose. Southern Pacific 4740 was used on freight trains many years ago on the Southern Pacific Railroad as the train crew's office. Then later on, Southern Pacific 4740 was retired and then in 1996 came to be part of the Arizona Railway Museum in Chandler, Arizona, where it can be seen today. And also, it is also used for birthday parties as well.
Okay, you could see behind me and right here is some speeders and MOW boggies, and these cars were once used for the railroads a long time ago to help inspect tracks when crews went on the line to inspect them. And also, here they are today at the Arizona Railway Museum in the collection. Let's look at more on the other side of the tracks. Okay, here's some more that you could see on the caddy corner rails, and sometimes they run these speeders here, like all those speeders I was just talking about. And yeah, well, I hope you all enjoyed learning about trains with me today in Matthew Lapp Train Guy segment show. Also, if you did not subscribe to my channel yet, please consider doing so, and I'll appreciate that if you do. And if you did not give my Facebook page a like yet, here it is right here as it pops up. And if you didn't bother to follow the Instagram page yet, here it is as well as it pops up. So this is Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy segment show, signing out. Until next time, all aboard.